Hello everyone! Dear students, today we are reading Chapter 7, The Adventure, written by Jayant Narlikar, an Indian writer and astrophysicist born in 1938. Our chapter, The Adventure, is an extract of the latter half of the story The Adventure. This is a science fiction story in which two theories are mentioned. One is the catastrophe theory and the other one is lack of determinism in quantum theory. These two theories are tried to be explained through an imaginary set of events. This imaginary set of events would have occurred in the life of a professor of history if the result of a battle more than 200 years earlier would have been different. There are two main characters. One is Professor Gaitonde and the other one is Rajendra Deshpande. Earlier part of the story, which we are not familiar with, says that Professor Gangadhar Pant Gaitonde was an eminent historian and a leading public figure of Pune. He has a catastrophic accident which causes him to transition to a parallel world for 60 hours. Professor Gaitonde transitions to a parallel world for 60 hours due to an accident. What happened was that, as we know, Professor Gaitonde was an eminent historian and a leading public figure of Pune. He was much in demand for presiding over public functions, and he had just completed his 999th occasion for presiding at a function. So he had decided that his 1000th appearance on the stage would be for history. It would be something special. That occasion was to come 2 weeks later at a seminar devoted to the Third Battle of Panipat. However, while he was walking home, a truck on the road hit him. He lost consciousness and, after regaining consciousness, he had transited to a parallel world. He was not aware of this. He was not aware that he had transited to a parallel world. He was in hospital, and after recovering, he was discharged from the hospital the next morning. He tried to reach his home, but he found that it did not exist in the parallel world. He decided to go to Bombay because his son was working in a British company in Bombay. He went to Pune railway station and took a train to Bombay. And this is where the extract starts from. Our extract starts from Mr. Gaitonde going to Pune railway station to take train to Bombay. Another character, Rajendra Deshpande, is a scientific expert who tries to rationalize Professor Gaitonde's experience by applying these two theories, the catastrophe theory and the lack of determinism in quantum theory. The Jijamata Express sped along the Pune-Bombay route considerably faster than the Deccan Queen. Sped along means acting or moving fast. It means rapidly. Sped comes from the verb to speed. To speed along means to move very fast. Pune-Bombay route is now known as Mumbai. Bombay is now known as Mumbai. Route refers to a direction or way or course. It means a way or course taken in getting from a starting point to a destination. Deccan Queen is an Indian passenger train that connects the two largest cities of the Indian state of Maharashtra, Mumbai and Pune. The service was named as Deccan Queen after the nickname for Pune, Queen of the Deccan. Queen of the Deccan is nickname for Pune. The Jijamata Express was going very fast. It sped along the Pune-Bombay route considerably faster than the Deccan Queen. Considerably means much more fast than the Deccan Queen. The Jijamata Express was very fast. There were no industrial townships there. Township refers to one of the local divisions or districts, each containing a village or small town. There were no industrial townships outside Pune. The first stop, Lonavala, came in 40 minutes. The Ghat section that followed was no different from what he knew. Ghat sections refers to stairs or a passage leading down to a river. The Ghat section was no different from what he knew. It looked the same. The train stopped at Kharjat only briefly, only shortly, and went on at even greater speed. After stopping at Kharjat for a short while, the train went even faster. It went on at even greater speed. It roared through Kalyan. To roar means to utter a full, deep cry. For example, you can say, we heard a lion roar. To roar is usually referred to a lion or some other large wild animal. We can also say, a car roared past. It is used for a vehicle, which means to move at high speed, making a loud, prolonged sound. Meanwhile, the racing mind of Professor Gaitonde had arrived at a plan of action in Bombay. We know that Professor Gaitonde had an accident, and he is a bit absent-minded and confused. He is trying to find some questions. He is trying to solve some questions. He is trying to find some answers. So at the same time, meanwhile, the racing mind. The racing mind means if your mind is racing, you are thinking very quickly and hard about something because you are very excited, frightened, and so on. So at the same time, the racing mind of Professor Gaitonde had arrived at a plan of action in Bombay. Plan of action is a phrase of plan. It means an organized program of measures to be taken in order to achieve a goal. This was his plan of action. It is said that in Bombay he thought of something. His mind arrived at a plan of action in Bombay. Indeed, as a historian, he felt he should have thought of it sooner. He would go to a big library and browse through history books. Professor Gaitonde thought of a plan, and he was surprised that as a historian he didn't think of it earlier. He said he should have thought of it sooner, but it didn't occur to him. He would go to a big library and browse through history books. To browse or to go through something. He was planning to go to the library and go through history books to find the answers. That was the surest way of finding out how the present state of affairs was reached. He also planned eventually to return to Pune and have a long talk with Rajendra Deshpande, who would surely help him understand what happened. Professor Gaitonde is on his way to Bombay. In Bombay, he thinks of something, and he is surprised that, as a historian, this idea hasn't occurred to him earlier. He is planning to go to a big library and go through some history books to find some answers. That was the surest way of finding out how the present state of affairs was reached. Because after the accident, there were many things which were confusing for Professor Gaitonde. He also planned eventually to return to Pune and have a long talk with Rajendra Deshpande, who would help him. Surely means for sure. Definitely he would help him understand what happened. That is, assuming that in this world there existed someone called Rajendra Deshpande. We can see that Professor Gaitonde is very confused. He's not even sure that there is someone by the name of Rajendra Deshpande. He's not sure does this person really exist in this world. To assume means to suppose to be the case, to presume. The train stopped beyond the long tunnel. Tunnel is an artificial underground passage, especially one built through a hill or under a building, road or river. The train stopped beyond the long tunnel. Beyond means after this long tunnel. After the train passed the long tunnel, it stopped. It was a small station called Sarhad. An Anglo-Indian in uniform went through the train checking permits. Permits refers to an official document giving someone authorization to do something. It is said that an Anglo-Indian in uniform this is where the British Raj begins. You are going for the first time, I presume? Khan Sahib asked. When Gaitonde had to get a permit to visit Bombay, he was told something. He was told that this is where the British Raj begins. He was told that Bombay was British territory, while the rest of India was independent. On the journey in a first-class compartment of the Jijamata Express, Professor Gaitonde sat beside Khan Sahib. who would be going to Peshawar from Delhi on business. Khan Sahib is asking, "This is where the British Raj begins. You are going for the first time, I presume." To presume means to suppose, to imagine, or to assume. Professor Gaitonde says, "Yes." And the reply was factually correct. Factually is an adverb. It means with regard to what is actually the case. Factually means in relation to fact. This was quite correct as well. Gangadhar Pant had not been to this Bombay before. He ventured a question. To venture means to undertake a risky or daring journey or course of action. It also means to dare to do or say something that may be considered odd. To venture a question means to put forward a question. Gangadhar Pant is asking, "And Khan Sahib, how will you go to Peshawar?" "This train goes to the Victoria terminus. I will take the Frontier Mail tonight out of Central." Victoria terminus is now known as Chhatrapati Shivji terminus. He is explaining his route. And the professor is asking him, "How far does it go? By what route?" "Bombay to Delhi, then to Lahore, and then Peshawar." "A long journey. I will reach Peshawar the day after tomorrow." Thereafter, Khan Sahib spoke a lot about his business, and Gangadhar Pant was a willing listener. Professor Gangadhar Pant was listening willingly. He was very interested to hear about his business. For in that way, he was able to get some flavor of life in this India that was so different. The train now passed through the suburban rail traffic. Suburban refers to something which is ordinary. Suburban means of or characteristic of a suburb, such as suburban life. The blue carriages carried the letters GBMR on the side. The blue carriages, carriage refers to a coach. Carriage means any of the separate sections of a train that carry passengers. And these blue carriages carry the letters GBMR on the side. Greater Bombay Metropolitan Railway, explained Khan Sahib. See the tiny Union Jack painted on each carriage, a gentle reminder that we are in British territory. Here we can see that there is something written on each carriage. Greater Bombay Metropolitan Railway. And there is a tiny Union Jack painted on each carriage. Here, Sahib Khan is asking Professor Gangadhar Pant. He says, "See the tiny Union Jack painted on each carriage. A gentle reminder that we are in British territory." Here it is said that Bombay is British territory, while the rest of India is independent. The train began to slow down beyond Dadar and stopped only at its destination, Victoria Terminus. The station looked remarkably neat and clean. The staff was mostly made up of Anglo-Indians and Parsis, along with a handful of British officers. As he emerged from the station, Gangadhar Pant found himself facing an imposing building. The letters on it proclaimed its identity to those who did not know this Bombay landmark. So the train began to slow down and finally it stopped at its destination, Victoria Terminus. The station was neat and clean, and the staff was mostly made up of Anglo-Indians, Parsis, and British officers. As he emerged from the station, it is said that Professor Gangadhar Pant found himself facing an imposing building. As he came out from the station, he found himself facing an imposing building. Imposing means impressive, grand, or eye-catching in appearance. The letters on this building proclaimed its identity to those who did not know this Bombay landmark. It was written, East India House Headquarters of the East India Company. Prepared as he was for many shocks, Professor Gaitonde had not expected this. The East India Company had been wound up shortly after the events of 1857. At least, that is what history books said. Yet, here he was. Here it was, not only alive, but flourishing. So history had taken a different turn, perhaps before 1857. How and when had it happened? He had to find out. It is said that Professor Gaitonde was prepared. He was prepared, but he was still very surprised seeing East India headquarters of the East India Company written on this building. This East India Company had been, it says, wound up shortly after the events of 1857. We know that in 1857 there was an uprising in India against the rule of the British East India Company. Professor Gaitonde says that here it was, not only alive but flourishing. So history had taken a different turn, perhaps before 1857. Professor Gaitonde suspects that there is something wrong in history because what he can see is East India House headquarters of the East India Company, and the history books are telling us different. Now Professor Gaitonde wants to find out how and when had it happened. He had to find out. As he walked along Hornbill Road, as it was called, he found a different set of shops and office buildings. There was no handloom house building. Instead, there were Boots and Woolworth departmental stores, imposing offices at Lloyd's, Barclays, and other British banks, as in a typical high street of a town in England. While walking, Professor Gaitonde is seeing many buildings. He's seeing sets of shops and office buildings with names such as Boots and Woolworth. He's seeing imposing offices of Lloyd's. He's seeing Barclays and other British banks, as in a typical high street of a town in England. He turned right along Home Street and entered Forbes Building. "I wish to meet Mr. Vinay Gaitonde, please," he said to the English receptionist. "This is his son. He came to Bombay to find his son." However, the receptionist, she searched through the telephone list, the staff list, and then through the directory of employees of all the branches of the firm. She shook her head and said, "I'm afraid I can't find anyone of that name either here or in any of our branches. Are you sure he works here?" This was a blow, not totally unexpected. Here, Professor Gaitonde finds out that there is no one by this name. There is no Vinay Gaitonde working there. No Vinay Gaitonde is working in any branch of this firm. This was a blow, this was a hit, this was something which was actually not totally unexpected. He was confused and he had many questions. So some things were surprising, but he was expecting that things will be complicated. This was a blow, not totally unexpected. If he himself were dead in this world, what guarantee had he that his son would be alive? Indeed, he may not even have been born. Because Professor Gaitonde is in parallel world, and he comes to a conclusion that perhaps his son may not even have been born. This is another time. This is some time in the past. So Gaitonde had planned out his activities on his visit to Bombay. He would try to meet his son and then go to a big library to solve the mystery of his transition. However, he saw East India House written on the building, which indicated that the East India Company still existed in Bombay. After that, he found various British companies and buildings on the road. He visited his son's office to meet him. But what did he find out? He found out that no one by such name worked there, although the company was the same one. He thanked the girl politely and came out. It was characteristic of him not to worry about where he would stay. His main concern was to make his way to the library of the Asian Society to solve the riddle of history. A riddle refers to a question or statement intentionally phrased so as to require its answer. A riddle. He wanted to solve this riddle of history. Grabbing a quick lunch at a restaurant, he made his way to the town hall. He was on his way to the library. Yes, to his relief, the town hall was there, and it did house the library. House in this context means to house. To house means to accommodate. It accommodated the library as well. He entered the reading room and asked for a list of history books, including his own. He was looking for his own books as well. His 5 volumes duly arrived on his table. He started from the beginning. Volume 1 took the history up to the period of Ashoka. Volume 2 up to Samudragupta. Volume 3 up to Muhammad Ghori. And Volume 4 up to the death of Aurangzeb. Up to this period of history was as he knew it. Up to this period, history was as he knew it. It was the same. The change evidently had occurred in the last volume. Evidently means obviously. After going through these books, Professor Gaitonde sees that the change must have happened in the last volume. Reading volume 5, from both ends inwards, Gangadhar Pant finally converged on the precise moment where history had taken a different turn. So, Professor Gaitonde visits the town hall building in which the library of the Asian Society was located. Luckily for him, it also existed in the parallel world. In the library, he finds these 5 volumes on Indian history which he had written himself. On going through the 5th volume, which gave India's history after the death of Aurangzeb, he found that the result of the Third Battle of Panipat in 1761 was written differently from what he knew, although he was the author of this book in the parallel world. He finds that there are some changes in the last volume. Everything is fine, but in the last volume, which he read from both ends inwards, it means he read it throughout, from beginning and from the end inwards. And he realizes that here is where history takes a different turn. Whatever was written there was written differently from what he had written, from what he knew, although he was the author of this book in the parallel world. That page in the book described the Battle of Panipat, and it mentioned that the Marathas won it handsomely. Handsomely means elegantly. Here, Professor finds out that Marathas actually won. Abdali was routed and he was chased back to Kabul by the triumphant Maratha army led by Sadashivrao Bau and his nephew, the young Vishwasrao. Triumphant means successful or victorious. Here it is said that the page in the book described that the Battle of Panipat that was mentioned, it was mentioned that Marathas won. It was something different. It was mentioned that Marathas won, and it was mentioned that Abdali was routed, he was chased away. His route had changed, he went back to Kabul, and this Maratha army was led by Sadashivrao Bau and his nephew, the young Vishwasrao. The book did not go into a blow-by-blow account of the battle itself. A blow-by-blow description means it was not going in details. It means an account, description, or commentary, including every detail of the action or event. Blow-by-blow account means in details. And it is said that the book did not go into details of the battle itself. Rather, it elaborated in details its consequences for the power struggle in India. Consequence means outcome or result, a result or effect, typically one that is unwelcome or unpleasant. This book didn't go in details of the battle, however, it elaborated in detail the consequences for the power struggle in India. To elaborate means to develop or to present in further detail, such as a theory or a policy or a system. Gangadhar Pant read through the account avidly. Avidly is an adverb. It means with great interest and enthusiasm. Gangadhar Pant had gone through it avidly, with a lots of interest, with great interest. The style of writing was unmistakably his, yet he was reading the account for the first time. This is where Professor sees that the style of writing was his. However, to him it looked as if he is reading this for the first time. What he found out was that these things which were different were that the book said that the Marathas had won the battle, whereas he knew that they had lost it. From here onwards, the history of India changed, which explained why and what Gaitonde had been experiencing for the last few hours. He will find confirmation in a Marathi journal about how exactly the Marathas had won the battle. We will continue next time.